Hey guys, thanks for joining us. Today is going to be an Azure Information Protection session. I'm Yossi Basha. I'm from Azure Information Protection Product Group, CXP, which means that we are the people inside of the product group that work with the partners, that work with the customers. We're responsible for two main things. One is work a lot with you guys to help you deploy successfully, make sure that you have everything that you need, make sure that you know, because we work with a lot of customers, what is the best way to do X. With AAP, there are a few things that you can do. There are a few variations of how should I do a specific thing. And that's where we come in to tell you this is what we see in a lot of customers. This is our experience, and this is how we like things to be done. And I'll talk about the collateral of the things that I will be able to share with you to help you do things on your own. The other side of the thing that I do is also make sure that I collect back feedback that I get from customers to make the product better. So Microsoft became very, very agile in the past few years. It's not we're building products in a void and you'll use whatever it will give you because it's Microsoft and we know best. My team is actually in charge of collecting all of that feedback, making sure that our product will fit in 6 months to what you as customers, partners say that the product should have. Denis?
Denis Mizetski. I'm Azure Information Protection Product Manager, leading mainly the admin portal and the AIP scanner feature that we just released last month. As you said, we are here to hear you, to present new stuff, but it's more important for me to hear from you what you search for, what are the showstoppers, what you think about new features, what we need to add, what we need to change. Then please feel free. I would like to have a lot of questions here. It's very important for me to hear what's important to you, to hear your feedback, and to help you to understand what we are doing and why we are doing it this way.
Thanks. So today we're going to talk about two main things, and the session is going to be split into two parts. I'll speak first, and I'll talk about Azure Information Protection today. How do we see it? What's the best way of using that? I will give you some examples from customers, from how Microsoft did things, so that you can compare. In my part, as Denis said, this is for my preference is to have not a monologue, but a dialogue. So if you want to stop me at any point, if you want to talk about things that may be related to you, please do so. If I'm talking too fast or too slow, if you already know it, stop me, let me know. This session is built, so I have a lot of things to talk about, but I'm very happy to make it dynamic. If you want me to talk about something that product group will know and you want to talk about, just stop me at any point, ask questions. Sounds fair? Thanks. And Denis's part is going to be a lot about roadmap. What do we see with Azure Information Protection today? What are the new things that we just brought out? And how will Azure Information Protection or Microsoft Information Protection is going to evolve in the past year and a bit more. So let's start with what do we actually mean when we say information protection? What is information protection? So of course, when we say information protection, we talk about unstructured data. There's a whole part of how do we work with SQL and structured data, and they are doing a lot of work with us. But today in this session in Azure Information Protection, we're going to talk about things that users work with, emails, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. So when we say information protection or Microsoft Information Protection solution is going to help you protect your sensitive data throughout this life cycle. Life cycle means from the point that this is created until the point that someone stops using that. Even if it goes outside of your company, that's still its life cycle. So inside and outside of the organization. I'll switch through that because everyone knows the story, right? So in the past, our perimeter was very controllable. We knew what's ours, what's not ours. We had the ability to enforce people. This is not the world anymore. So we have a lot more boundaries. We have a lot more complexity, which is why with Azure Information Protection, we know that other parties will do identity and other parties will do DLP and will protect the outgoing interfaces of your company. What we say is, as long as we protect the information, as it's created, as it's being worked on, I don't care what happens to it after that. If it goes on Box, if it goes on Google, we have solutions that can help. But even if it leaks, as long as it's protected and you know what it is, it's data that no one will be able to read and do anything with it, even if it goes outside of your perimeter and you have no control over it. So let's talk about what do we hear as a product group and what drives us to make this product as it is. So when we go and when we talk to a lot of the security folks and a lot of the business folks in company and ask them, what is your problem? How can we solve? What does Azure Information Protection bring to you? So the one thing that we hear a lot is my company is moving to Office 365. We're moving to the cloud, and as you've heard in the last slides, basically, I'm not sure how to identify and protect my data before it goes to the cloud. I need to understand what data do I have, what's sensitive for me, what do I want to keep, how do I want to protect it when this goes to the cloud, and the users will now have a lot of more options to work with this data. So Azure Information Protection will talk about that, and Denis will show how we do on-prem before going to the cloud with the Azure Information Protection Scanner. And Mike, who's following after us, will talk about cloud app security and talk about how do we make this whole story work together from on-prem to cloud. Next is EU GDPR. Who here is preparing for EU GDPR and have some actual action items to do before that? All right, thanks. So what we say, and we know that GDPR is a bit vague at this point in time, but the consensus across all of our customers is as such. Anyone that wants to be compliant with GDPR has to have some kind of classification solution. So GDPR is not just protection and making sure that nothing leaks. It's a lot about people and processes. I want to make sure that I give the responsibility out to my users. I want to make sure that myself as an information protection officer, myself as IT inside of an organization or a business manager, I want to make sure that I've done all that I can to make sure that my users are aware. They know what sensitivity is, they know how to treat it, and of course I want to make sure that Azure Information Protection provides all of the auditing and logs that will help me then identify what happens with my data. Large problems that companies have today, and we've tried to solve it as best we can with Azure Information Protection, is how do I educate my information workers to know what sensitivity is, to know how to work and what are different levels of data sensitivity inside the organization, right? So today you might educate your users as best as you can. You'll send an email, you do some corporate training, you'll put posters. No one really knows, and the reason is it's not something native to them in their day-to-day experience. You can talk about it, they'll remember it maybe for a week at best, but then life goes on and they just forget about it, so they'll do what they have to do. With Azure Information Protection, and I'll ask the question now, who has seen Azure Information Protection? Who knows how the user experience is like? All right, good. So we'll do some of that, and I'll show you, and keep in mind that when I show you, this is not just a security tool of click here and classify, click here and protect. This is also something that will educate the users as they go on their day-to-day activities. And how do I make sure that I remember this? How does this play to my day-to-day? Next is we want to share information with external parties. And the problem is when I send something out of my perimeter, I lose control over it. I can send a quote to another partner that I'm working with. I can send some information that I want to still have control over it. Maybe that quote timed out. Maybe I sent out another one and the old one is not relevant anymore. Maybe I want to make sure that this is not being sent across to someone else, a third party of that third party. So Azure Information Protection, as soon as you control something and you place protection in place, that means that you have control over the document. And I'll show you a bit on what does that mean and how does this specifically talk to you. And we've done a lot of work in making sure that Azure Information Protection is also sent protected content to anyone, no matter which device and which platform he uses. So you'll see that we've switched, right? We call this session Azure Information Protection, but in a lot of the slides title, you'll see Microsoft Information Protection. This is because Microsoft now understands the value of having unstructured data protected and classified and understood by the company, not just as a product, Azure Information Protection on top of things, but as a holistic view. Microsoft will now start to invest a lot of efforts, and you'll see that in the roadmap, on how do we make everything work together? How does all of my products, because I'm a Microsoft user, work together and speak one common language? So in this presentation, we'll talk about the information protection pillar. So I know that a lot of you have not seen Azure Information Protection, which is why I like this slide, because it illustrates what Azure Information Protection has been through the last few years. So let's go back 15 years or a bit more into the world of protection in Microsoft and when it started. So about 15, 20 years ago, we've had Aramis, which was a platform that Microsoft provided. It's set as a service in your company, and it had an add-in into Office that was natively integrated and allowed you to protect content. The user had to go, click 4 different clicks and select what he wants, and it was not that good to interact with. So what that provided was encryption. And encryption means that the file is encrypted, it's protected. If someone lives with the data outside of my organization, it's nothing they can do with. Access control means that you as an IT administrator or you as a user now deciding to protect a document, you get to control who gets access to that document. So it can be everyone in my company and only my company, or it can be only that specific individual that I'm now sending an email to. And policy enforcement means that you can actually decide not only who can read and who cannot, you get to decide what can they do with this document, who can print, who can edit, who can remove the protection, and who cannot. Then we moved into Azure about 4 years ago, something like that. And with the move to Azure, basically we did two basic things. One, we moved the solution into Azure, which brought a lot of federation, which brought a lot of mobile connectivity and the ability to not have a managed service on-prem in the company. And with that, we also brought in document tracking and document revocation. Document tracking basically means that Azure Information Protection has a portal that lets you as an IT administrator or you as a user understand if I send something out, even internal or external, who tried to open the document and was allowed to, who tried to open the document and was not allowed to, what's their name, how did they try to authenticate, how many times have they done that. So you get information about what happens with your documents. And document revocation, basically, it's a remote kill. If something is protected, that means that a user who wants to get access to the document has to come to me to ask for the key to decrypt it. That means that at any given point in time, I can tell Azure Information Protection, don't give any more keys to this document because I've said this is the remote kill switch. About 2 years ago, Microsoft acquired Secure Islands. Denis and I actually came from that acquisition. Secure Islands basically brought a lot of classification and labeling on top of the good encryption mechanism. And the goal was two things. One, we had Aramis, which was protection, and it was great because it did protection very, very well. But the problem was it was one big hammer, and every problem that you had, you have to hit with an encryption hammer. So everything had to be encrypted to maintain control. We wanted to change that flow and give you more tools as an organization to work with that. And we want to make sure that this is something that users can actually do and they can relate to it. So we added classification and labeling, which is basically another layer of protection. And we'll talk about how all of that comes together. So you get to define the classification, you get to define the label, which is header, footer, and persistent metadata that sticks with the file wherever it goes. So even if the document is not protected, the fact that it is labeled means that you can now do things with it. You can enforce DLP rules because it has a specific metadata property that says that this is internal or this is confidential. There's a lot of what I can do with classification, and I'll talk a bit about that. So let's see how this all comes together into one lifecycle picture. So a document will start with classification. I, as a user, will say this is internal, or the system will say this is something that I automatically identified should be internal. Classification will trigger label, which is A, the persistent metadata, and B, this is visual marking that you get to define. If the label says that the document should be encrypted, then the document gets encrypted. Access control is also defined by IT or defined by the user. Who gets to do what? Policy enforcement, document tracking, document revocation, it all comes through that. So you only get to decide this is what I want my users to do. And they don't have to know that protection is taking place. They don't have to know that this is what you're doing in the background. For their day-to-day experience, this is just I'm working as if I would have worked. They don't really understand that protection is in place unless they do something that they're not supposed to do, which is good. So let's talk about a customer example, and let's talk about the journey that one of our customers did. So basically, this customer is EU-based. They're an environmental solution business. There are about 15,000 employees total. And basically, this customer came to us and said, look, we got a requirement for the business about 4 years ago that we need to have a classification and protection solution. This is now, of course, accelerated with GDPR, but the business actually identified that they need it much, much before. They were looking at other solutions in the ecosystem. They looked at ADRMS and they said, this is good for encryption, but it's not answering our need. They looked at Azure RMS when Azure RMS came out. They looked at other competitors, but none of them really clicked and have been able to answer what they were looking for. So what they did, about a little over a year ago, we had a conversation. We came with Azure Information Protection, that was last October. The account team came to me and said, have a conversation with that customer. We did. We went on a call. We started the kickoff. They said, show us what Azure Information Protection is. And as soon as we've showed them what the functionality is, what the capability is, what was the roadmap, they said, oh, this is the solution that we have been waiting for, which is great. And we see that with a lot of customers saying, we know that you had the potential to do something which is very, very good with ADRMS and Azure RMS, but now this actually clicks to something that I, as an administrator, can control and the users can understand. So we had a kickoff. We started to do things. We helped them along with how should my classification look like? What is my taxonomy? What is right for my users and my business? And how should I identify that? And again, going back, I said, and I will share with you guys, what is our best practice as a CXP? And of course, we can help you fine-tune that process. So from that point of the kickoff, they were actually quite quick. So in 3 months, they were fully deployed. All of their users have classification in place. All of their users have protection in place. They went with a slow approach of saying, we're not enforcing anything. They let the users decide what is confidential, what is protected, but they've done the majority of the work because now the foundations is built. And I'll talk about the best practices, and you'll see that what we say and our mantra is, start slow, start with what is core for you, and then expand as you grow. Azure Information Protection will give you that ability. So the value and what's next. So as I said, they started with the core scenario, the things that are really important to them. All of the users became educated. And the one thing that I really liked is they came back and said all of our users actually had positive feedback. They all say, I feel more secured now that I'm working and collaborating with documents in my organization. And the next step is going to be, how do I work with secure email or Office 365 message encryption? How do I expand my use cases? A, collaborate with externals. B, have better narrow scopes and silos of people and documentation that they can work with. I'm pausing for a second. Any questions, anything that pops up to you or you want to talk about? No, good. So let's talk best practices and what is our recommendation, right? Let's assume that you are a company, you're quite big. Let's take the other example, 15,000 users, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. You want to get to the point that you can actually apply protection and have protection in place for all of your users. So our recommendation is phase 1, and remember that protection and classification and the full stack is the end goal. And this is going to be a process, not a sprint of we go from nothing to something in very, very quick time. So what we say is start very, very small. Take a 3-month period, introduce classification. When you introduce classification in your organization, you've already done the majority of the work. You get business agreement on what should information labeling look like in my organization. You've gone through marketing to talk about how should the visual marking be in my organization. Do I need a header? Do I need a footer? How do I let users know that this document is now protected? You've gone through how should users do it. You've gone through user education. They now know, and you've educated them that information protection is something that speaks to their day-to-day. And you're actually able to benefit from classification only. So let's take the IT incentive. You get a very, very quick win from the business. You understand the value of the full process of Azure Information Protection. You've started with classification. This is all positive feedback because you've not applied protection. You're not blocking business activities. You're just starting with that step, which will give you a lot of value. You can integrate with DLP. You can integrate with your proxies. You can actually identify and get all of the login information because now you can see who's working with sensitive content. You can see who's sending sensitive content. You get a lot just by turning on classification and logging. And of course, this is now also something that you can audit. If you're preparing for GDPR, Azure Information Protection will tell you who declassified the document, who took something that was confidential and turned it into internal, and will even ask the user, why are you doing that? Give us a reason. Take some authority and think twice before you're actually doing something that might have negative impact on my company. So how do I protect? And we have these pillars of what do we want to do, and you'll see this across a lot of Microsoft products, right? So detect, classify, protect, and monitor. So first we want to understand, then we'd want to actively classify. We want to enforce protection, and then we'd want to monitor. So this is kind of like another view of looking at the phased approach. So from a CXP perspective, what I will say is get started today. And how do you get started today? And what do you want to do? And how do you want to do it? And this is where I said I'll give you some collateral. So let me show you what can I provide. And I'll keep that email open. Whoever wants that information, you can come to me after the conversation, and I'll add your name to that email. So basically, I created a little knowledge pack document that will give you a lot of information if you want to introduce Azure Information Protection in your company. It starts with videos. It goes through blogs of things that we think are very important for you to read. It's things like the Getting Started guide, which includes even samples. If you don't know what classification is right for your company, we took a lot of examples for customers and divided them by industry. So we can tell you if you're a financial institute, this is what we see and this is the average. So you actually have examples you can go to the business with and get very quick agreement of this is what other businesses do. This might be the right solution for me. If they want to change, you can change. We'll give you things like the user communication. This is actually what Microsoft used when we designed Azure Information Protection inside of Microsoft, when we introduced it. So Microsoft IT created a lot of user communications. So we took those, we generified those. So all you have to do is change the yellow things into my company, my support page, my logo, and you're good to go. So all of the user communication is already generified and ready for you guys to work on. So again, come to me after this presentation. If you want me to send you that email, I'm happy to. Before we move on to some demos, and I know that you're excited to see how the product actually works and what we're building and how the roadmap looks like. Any questions about how do I do this in my organization? Things that you've tried to do and have not worked, things that you think are blockers to you? Good. So let's show you secure email, and let's talk about how did we enable Azure Information Protection to work with any recipient that you might send an email to or a protected item to, no matter where they are. So I don't know if some of you have already worked with protection and have tried to send something protected to a Gmail recipient. If you've known ADRMS or Azure RMS, it was just not possible. It sucked. We had a very complicated process of achieving that goal. And what we did is basically Office 365 message encryption, which is a feature of Office 365 of Exchange Online. And what we do, and you can see that this is my Microsoft corporate machine. This is not a demo tenant. This is actually what any Microsoft users see. And this is how Azure Information Protection looks like for a user in the organization. You can see that this email is general because this is the default for Microsoft. Any new document or email that I create is general to the company. It's not confidential, but it's definitely not public. So we're able to say that out loud. You can see that we try to remove a lot of the user training that you need to do by having this custom information when you hover on top of a classification. So you can actually tell your users without publicly going and pushing information. If they want to know something, they'll hover on top of it and they will see what general means for my organization. And this is all configurable for you. So let's send this email to my Gmail account. And I'll say this is protected. And let's even add an attachment to that. Let's add a PDF. And let's send it. So let's switch to Gmail, which is the hardest part, right? So a Gmail user will not have Azure Information Protection. This is a completely siloed client. You know nothing about him. You don't know if they have Office. Can they even work with protected content? Azure RMS needs someone to decrypt the content for him. I don't know anything about the client, but I've sent a protected email, and my assumption is that the user is going to be able to consume that content and do something with it. So while the email travel, let's take this example that I sent out the other day. I got the notification. It should be here. There it is. So this is what I sent now. And I didn't protect it. So let's look at this one. I just want to go back and show you. When I want to protect as a user, all I have to do is click confidential and recipients only. So as a user, as soon as I do this, the document is protected, the email is protected only to the people that I send the email to and should read it. So the experience is like this. I get a nice little message saying, Yossi from Microsoft sent you a message. Click here to read this message. And up until now, we had two blockers to have the user open that. One is, how do I validate the identity of the recipient? If it's a Gmail, it's outside of the Azure wall. I don't have a way of knowing that you are who you say you are and not just some random person that got the URL by chance. So I have two options. If you're Google, Yahoo, or Microsoft, you can sign in with your credentials. So single sign-on, just click here and it will work. If you're any other identity provider or email provider, you can do one-time password. We'll send you a one-time password. You can put it back in the system. And by having authenticated to your identity provider, we'll validate that you are who you say you are. So the first limitation, authentication, is done. I'll click sign in with Google. I'm already using Chrome. It has my token, so I don't even have to put on my credentials. And what will happen is Exchange Online will give me an OAuth-like experience of this is the message that you got. So you can see that this message is protected. If I'll try to forward that email to someone else, I cannot because it is protected with Azure Information Protection. It opens a bidirectional communication channel. Now the customer or someone else that you send in the email, whether it's a business or a customer, can reply, and that reply is protected through the same channel of Azure Information Protection. And you can see that even documents that I send, it will render them. So this is the second limitation. I don't need an application, no matter if I'm using an iPad, a mobile device, a Windows machine, I don't need anything as a requirement to open protected content, which is very big for us. So let's talk about what this means for you. Let's say you're a bank and you want to send statements to your customers. Let's say you want to send some billing information, whichever information that may be. If you have a system today, likely you need to whitelist some customers. You need to create a database. This means that you don't need to know the user before. There's no database to be created. You just send the email, say protected, and we'll do the rest. Exchange Online, you don't have to configure anything. It will be magic for you. And the other thing that is very important is Google, as an email provider, or any email provider that you send this email to, is not going to be able to index. It doesn't know what's in there. So let's take my mortgage statement. My bank will send that clear text because they sent it to me. Only I can authenticate to Gmail and open that and get that email. But actually, Google can look at my mortgage statement, and I might not like that. So this is a secure information channel for you and your company to work together. So that's the B2C example. B2B is if I need to collaborate with a partner, and again, I want to make sure that I control the information, this is how I get things to stay protected. And the last thing that I want to show you, and this is a segue to Mike, we talked about how we're doing cloud and also on-prem. So I'm just going to take a document that I prepared, which is Tech Day Sweden. And I'm going to upload that into Box, and Mike will show you what happens next. All right, Denis, thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Thank you, Yossi. And I'm going to talk to you about roadmap, about our concept, our pillar, our main thing that we are going to concentrate next year. 1 minute. Okay, then as Yossi mentioned, Aramis is a long-living technology. It was started somewhere sometime in 2004. But actually AIP, it's a new concept that we came with it just a year ago. Last October we released the first line. It enabled you not only to protect but also label and classify and label data. Then through this year we worked hard in order to provide you delightful solution for Office on Windows. And we concentrated on Azure Information Protection, and we had a lot of feedback coming from customers about it's great, but it takes care just about Office on Windows. What's happening with Mac, what's happening with iOS, what's happening with mobile, Android, web apps, what are we going to do there? Other customers told us, you want us to install more and more products, why it's not a part of Office. Other customers told us, okay, you have a new classification solutions, you are not the first ones on the market, we have already some classification stuff, we believe in AIP, but we have a lot of existing data, what are we going to do? And the last one, it was, you have so many solutions coming from Microsoft talking about information protection. Azure IP, Windows IP, Office IP, Office DLP, MCAS, and it was endless list, and we had some hooks and tricks, and we told you can integrate this, you can define something here in registry, and you can connect them, you can teach Exchange to read metadata, and at the end we heard a lot of feedback that told us, okay, it's good, but it's not good enough. We don't want to struggle with all your products and try to do your job and enable them to work together. Then this guided us to talk about a new concept. We went back home and we talked to all information protection pillars inside Microsoft, and we came with the idea that yes, you're right, we need to provide you one solution which is Microsoft Information Protection. Then we are going to take care of integration between all our components and provide you one solution, which is Microsoft Information Protection. And main three things that we are going to concentrate on is make the solution native. We don't want you to install more and more clients and more software to enable new capabilities. Make it unified, means you will have same classification, labeling, and protection for Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, mobile, web apps, whatever is there. It will not come everything in one day, but we understand it should be the same concept, it should be the same label, and you should not go to Office to define retention labels, and you should go then to AAP and define classification labels. It should be one label, and it can provide different features in different areas, but it should be one business taxonomy. And it should come anywhere. It should be on any client. It should come with SharePoint Online, Exchange Online. It should be in, we should support Box and third-party clouds. And we should also take care of on-prem data, because we want you all in cloud, but we understand you still have data on-prem. They also believe you will still have data on-prem 3, 4, 5 years from now. Some customers just don't want to take their most sensitive data and put it in the cloud. And we also understood that we need to provide a solution also for on-prem repositories. Anything else that you heard from customers which is not in one of these pillars, something that you think that is very, very important and we don't think about it now? Okay, I need some communication. Do you agree? Who agrees that this should be our next thing that we deliver?
Yes.
Okay. And those that didn't raise the hands, what do you think should be our concentration? Oh, very hard audience in Sweden, really. Okay, I'm trying. Okay, then let's talk about native. Then what do we have now? Now we have add-in for Office running on Office 2010, 2013, 2016. We changed a little bit at client. At the end of this slide, I will have a demo of what are the new small but important things that we put in the last version. And what do we have to provide in medium and long term? And the order matters here. We already work now on CLP for Office on Mac. It's coded in these days. I hope we will have it until end of this year. If not, in January, public preview, we'll be able to label on Word, Excel, PowerPoint on Mac. The next one will be extended to Office on Mac, and then we can tell Office on Mac can do anything that AAP can do on Windows. And it's going to be native. It's not an addition. It's not something new that you need to install on the on top of Office on Mac. It's developed in Office team, even not in our AAP team. Office developed it native, and I will show you some screenshots of what Mac can do a bit later. The next one will be Office Web Apps. Web Apps, it's Word, Excel, PowerPoint Online. When you work with SharePoint Online, you can just open the file in Word Online. Then this part is going to support label and protect driven by label. It will enforce exactly the same policy that AAP enforces on the endpoint. And we also understand that Office Online should be able to read IRM protected documents. Then, as you know now, there is this, an elephant in the room that we tell you, encrypt with AAP everything, and we tell you should store everything in SharePoint, and then you encrypt stuff, you put in SharePoint, and then you cannot read it in the SharePoint, right? Then this one is going to be handled by enabling Office Web Apps to read RMS protected documents.
Will it still be server-side encryption, or will the SharePoint have the rights like super user access to?
And there are several directions. We think about all of them, but you will be also able to take a document which is protected and render it. Of course, you will need to grant SharePoint rights to super user rights and how to do it. But we understand that as more users adopt AAP, you will have more and more documents that are already encrypted, and we actually guide you to protect at creation. Then we need also to provide you a solution what to do with these documents when they're in SharePoint Online. iOS and Android will come after the web apps, and the last one will be Office for Windows. It's a bit strange, right, that the Office on Windows is the last one? Okay, because we already have solution for Office on Windows. It's not native, but it's there. When we first want to handle stuff that we don't have, at the end, Office on Windows will also have a native integration of AAP. We no longer will need to install AAP client on it. It will just build in Office Click to Run. All this is planned to be closed next year. All of this stuff. And this is the order that we are going to work.
What about Office model apps?
What more apps?
On the Windows Store, the applications, if someone is using them.
Like, okay, then I need to check, but I assume Office Code, Office Native is going to support it, then Office Click to Run is there, then I don't know if there is a marketing decision to put it there too or not, but it's the same code. But if there is a demand from the market, it's not a big change. Okay, then this is how you are going to be able to label in Mac. You will have a classification vertical bar, can label, and then label will trigger the protection. And I will just switch to my demo. This is actually what we also did in last client. And if you're custom with AAP, what's strange here? I'm going to open the document, but just let me know what you think is strange there. There's no AAP bar, right? Okay. And I love my product. I think that everybody should have his bar, and should be a big, shiny bar. It's the most important thing in the office, but guess what? Most of users don't work with most sensitive data, right? Even me, 99.9% of data that I create is general. A lot of users, productivity users, not the finance or HR people, told us, you know, we don't need all this bar. Why do you take a precious real estate from my office? And you know, it was even more painful in Outlook. People remove everything from Raygon. They want to have much more space to work, and we heard this stuff. And although we very like our product, we enabled customers in the last version to decide if they present the bar to the end users or not. And you can force it. You can, in Microsoft, for example, we decided every user can decide what he sees, and I can just tell I want to show the bar, or I can remove it. But you can also decide that in your organization everybody has bar or everybody doesn't have bar, and you can also decide it per scope. And what we're going to do, for example, in Microsoft, people that work with sensitive information, with finance and HR, by default it will be enabled. For everybody else, it will be disabled. But sometimes I want to see some information, right? Maybe 99% of my data is not sensitive, but sometimes I can create something important. For example, I can, it's a SOW, let's put some, I'm going to write here, Project Samos is not in the scope. Okay. What I wanted to tell you, and I will continue to work. I didn't save the document. This is another change that we put in the last client. Until the last preview client, we asked you to save document in order to proceed to check the content that you added, in order to trigger automation or recommendation. Then we had several problems with it. First of all, it was real time. It affected the performance. Not everybody felt it, but on the low resources machines, some people felt it. And the second one, we needed you to do something in order to classify and label documents. Then currently we have a background process running using the built-in Office classification engine. When you type in something, you can continue to work, and we in the background will detect the text that you typed in. We don't need now read entire document, we just see what you do. And then, for example, I put some project Samos here. And that's why I have a trigger for recommendation. But sometimes, you know, that's why it's recommendation. My patterns can be not so accurate, right? Then I can tell, okay, It's not related to project summons, I just dismiss it. And then I go and continue to work. I will take a UK license number, and I will continue to work and then add more text. But now what happened? I have a rule that tells if you have GDPR data, this document should be automatically classified as confidential GDPR. I don't have any decision here. It's automatically classified. And as you have seen, I didn't have the bar. But when I have something important to tell customer, the bar is back. I see what's happening now. I can continue to work. Then you can enable your users to work without interruption, without seeing new stuff, until you have really something important to show them. Okay? Let me go back to the presentation. And let's talk about unify. And the second pillar was we want to unify as much as possible all of our products, all of our features into one product. Then first thing that we already did, we took the Office classification engine with 18 something predefined patterns. By the way, more than 40 of them relevant for GDPR. And there is a very extensive work done now in Office to onboard more and more GDPR related patterns to this list. We no longer use our own classification engine that we had with just 5 patterns. We dropped it. We use the same engine that Office used. It helped us, first of all, add much more patterns. Second, customers don't need to think, okay, in Office DLP we detect it, in AIP we don't detect it. It's exactly the same engine. And Mike is going to talk about it too, and we're also thinking about adding it to CAS later. What we are going to do in short term, we work on the problem that we had with the sync engine on the SharePoint, and what's more important, we added an integration with conditional access. And some customers told us we want to ensure that when somebody consumes secret information, we want to verify that he is passing through conditional policy. For example, he works on healthy machine, only on AD join machine we can access the content, or general for MFA. And currently we run a public preview for this feature. On the first phase we just enable you to tell everything protected with AIP requires conditional access. In the later phase we are going to do it per label. You can tell confidential doesn't require, secret requires. It's still not there, it's in code now. I'm going to show you the client experience with this stuff, and then Stefan from AD group, product group, will show you the admin side. Then let me create some new document. I'll just take it. Let's see I'll just take some template. I will save it. I'll save it to HR folder. What I have on the HR folder, there is an IRM protected library. Because I saved the document to this folder, it will be automatically protected with IRM. Wi-Fi is really slow. Wanted to show you the document is labeled as general. It's not encrypted. It's on my station. I stored it to the SharePoint. I didn't encrypt it. Now I will disconnect. I will connect as Alice, who is the HR person. Alice is a local user on this machine. She is not on the AD join machine. And I will go to the SharePoint. Document I edit test 3. I will open it first with Word Online. I don't have patience. I open in Word Online. Then what's happening now? The file is in Iron protected folder, but the rendering is done on the SharePoint side. Then SharePoint will present the file. I can read its content, but we have the same experience that we have with Aramis. I can block printing, then I will not be able to print from Word Online. And let's say I'm Alice, I'm working from home. I want to take this file and I want to work on my desktop machine at home. I will open with Word. Means I download the file now. What SharePoint Iron Protected Library does, it encrypts it with Aramis. And I am as Alice now downloaded the file, trying to open it to Word on non-healthy station. And very slow station. Come on. What happens now? Word sees that it's Iron protected file. It's going to be decrypted. Hit the Azure Information Protection service. I need to authenticate. Alice. And now I get the message from Conditional Access. I'm accessing this file, not from domain join machine. You cannot access it because there is a policy that requires me to use specific machine, a healthy machine, to access the content. And
cool.
Stefan?
Thanks. So while I'm connecting, and I don't have a microphone, so I'm just going to scream really loud. Who here is familiar with conditional access, what we have in Azure AD?
Everybody.
Almost, no? I think it's a little bit over 50%. So I'm here in the Azure portal, where we are in the Active Directory console, where you can go to conditional access. So that's over here. So clicking on conditional access, here's where I can create my policies. And what we actually did with the AIP client is that we just integrated it in the conditional access portal. So you can just treat it as any other app. But the cool thing next to it is that you can also apply any policy you can do for other apps also to this one. So we've seen that we've blocked access, but maybe we want to do multi-factor authentication, or we actually want to do something based on a risk. So let me guide you through the process. So at first we need to select the users and groups we want to apply this to. So you can basically select a group of high priority users and only apply it to them, or just say all users that are there. So for this demo, I just select all users. And then we go to the Cloud Apps part. So this is also where you could choose between all apps or selected apps, where in all apps basically means everything the user goes through, they go through this policy. When we go to select app, we have the possibility to select one of the applications. And the Wi-Fi is really slow.
Yeah, you see, it's not on
So while we're searching for the applications, which is normally pretty fast, but
I think it's searching.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of demos going on this app. Look, there it is.
Yeah, you see we are the first.
Because we like the AIP team so much, we put their application on top of the list. So what I would do here is just select the Microsoft Azure Information Protection application. And this is basically the main part of creating the rule. Just select the app if you want to do a policy for Azure Information Protection. Then we go into conditions, where we can fine-grain it a bit more. So we have the risk, the device platforms, locations, and client apps. So locations, for example, something we've announced on Ignite a few weeks ago, is that we can actually, instead of having a range of IP addresses, we can just select a country. So let's say you don't want anyone in China to read your documents. I could just select China as a location, put in a block rule, and as soon as I'm in China and opening the document, I will not be able to read it. Another thing is the sign-in risk part, is where we, based on a certain risk, we can block access or do MFA. Which means, for example, if I do some kind of impossible travel or I'm signing in from an unfamiliar location, I can ask for multi-factor authentication before you can open the document. So in this case, let's just leave this blank. And then look at the access control. So I can say over here what I want to do. So in this case, I can say grant access or block access. So the one you saw, the demo, was just a block access, which is pretty straightforward. You don't get any access. The other things we can do, whoa, that's fancy. Is also zoom in really fast with zoom it. And next to that, we can say, okay, require multi-factor authentication. Require the device to be marked as compliant. I think that's the one you did in your demo, right?
I did the compliant and the domain join.
Yeah, so compliant means your device is managed with an MDM, like Intune, and it has a fire scanner, it has a firewall enabled, that kind of stuff. Domain join device, and then we can choose to say, okay, do we want to require all the above options or even one of them? And with one of them, we can say, okay, you can access the document from a domain join device, or your device needs to be in a healthy state and managed. So this is how you configure the conditional access for the AIP and also for all the other clients, but this one particular for the AIP client. So as Denis already said, what we're now building is putting in an extra condition here, saying instead of every document, we can do it based on sensitivity. So if it's a confidential document, we want to block access. If it's just a general document, we want to do MFA. So that's what's coming. Cool.
Thank you.